it was a really exciting moment for me. And so I just remember that like that was yesterday. And that's how it all began. And from there, you just progress. And, obviously you have to do a good job and, represent while you're there. And that one Easterns, I believe we watched almost 5,600 waves within the week, which was pretty wild. And so you have to be totally focused during the day and just be on point. And because of that, I had the ability to get the invites to start doing WSL competitions. And once that door was opened, I've just never looked back. And to this day, feel so fortunate to be able to work with them and the ESA actually right now. This is where it all developed for me. I competed when I was younger for only a short time in the Delmarva, Ocean City, Maryland district when I was like 14 to 16. Then after that, I moved to the Outer Banks and I started traveling to Northern California, where I kind of explored the coast and surfed around the Mendocino area and Humboldt and Santa Cruz, and came back here. And then again, just finding my roots. And that's what brought me down to the contest to become a judge. And that was it. And been here ever since.
Hey, that's great to hear, Dave. I didn't know all that. So Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. In South Jersey district, we were expected in the 70s to judge as soon as we reached junior men's. And, there's a lot of benefits to that. We weren't aware of it at the time you were recruited, but, get some free snacks, some shade, but you get a great understanding of what goes into judging a heat, and, it really enhances your ability to compete on a higher level by seeing what goes into the judge's critique of a ride. So we'll talk about that over the next 3 webinars, but it's come a long way. And people like Tom McLaren and George Garlock and Dan Heritage schooled us on how to judge. They trained us on the beach in the 70s. And, we've been refining it decade after decade.
Yeah, wow, it's really cool. Well, I think tonight we're going to go over some basic stuff. I think we want to go over our judging forums first, and I think this will open up the door on how we really look at an amateur contest at our local district. Okay, so what you see here is our basic judging sheet. And it's so funny, from the simplest things, from the heat number to the division to the judge's name, you would think these are things that it's not such a big deal, but it is a major big deal, because once the tabulators receive this, it's important for them, if there is an issue, they can talk to the judge. So you have to fill out your name, you have to have the heat number, and you have to have what division you are. And a lot of people, when we first start off judging, really kind of forget to do those things. So just remember, when you sit down in that seat, make sure those things are filled out. This one is designed for a 6-person heat, which is our typical local district competition. With that being said, you have your basic colors: red, white, yellow, blue, orange, and green. And below that, let's just go ahead and continue down. You see the judges scoring. This is kind of a reference area where you can utilize this to come up with your score. So I'm going to go into this a little bit, because these are basics, but they are something that you develop a skill as you grow and do more competition. So when I first sat down and started judging, I think the one thing is I really reflected on this a lot, because it helped me. When I watched a wave, I would get, oh, that was kind of a poor ride. And then I knew that I was in the 1 to 2 range. And I went, wow, that's a good ride. So now I'm looking at the 7 to 8. And I really kind of went off that a lot. As I developed as a judge, you start to realize that a lot of recall and memory, and what we call a benchmark, is how you establish your heats. So let's go over really what a poor ride is. So to us, so let's say a 0 to 1, that's kind of an up and down. So that means somebody takes off, maybe falls over. I mean, literally gets almost to their feet, falls on their heel. We will start off with the 0.5. If they stand up, and they get to their feet and they just ride the whitewater and jump off, maybe that's just a 1 in 08. Just a 1. Let's start off with that way, 05 to a 1. Then if you have somebody drop in, try a turn, they're incomplete, we usually look at that between a 1-3, and I like to say sometimes maybe a 2-3. Typically, and I hate to use the holes half numbers here, but let's say 1-5 to 2-5. And the reason why is you have to separate what that incomplete was. What type of maneuver was it? So if you go to a contest, you have one guy drop in, he has enough speed where he could do an air, but he's incomplete. Well, how somebody he tries the floater and just falls over in the whitewater, you have to compare those two scores. The fact that he had the ability to pull an air makes it a higher level of an incomplete. So that's where we would be at the higher level of that incomplete score, possibly a 2-5. Anything lower than that, we would be breaking into the 1-5 realm. And that's where we start our comparisons. A fair ride is looking at your 3s to 4s. Somebody comes in, has a mid-face turn. It's not necessarily vertical in the pocket. It's just kind of just a little open face turn. You know, that's probably in the 3 or 4. Then we start linking maneuvers together, working on the criteria. That could be in your average ride where somebody might have a cutback and then a floater. A good ride is when you start seeing the maneuvers like really putting it in the pocket surfing, vertical, big sick floater, and bringing those combos together. And the same thing can go for an excellent ride, which is in the 9 to 10. So those are ways that we'll go over in the next course that's coming up, because we're going to really go in with Gordon Lawson, the WSL head judge. Is going to come on board with us, and we're going to talk about criteria and separating these scores and understanding what he would call surf IQ. And that's where we go from there. But let's talk on how we start a heat. So as a head judge, we would have, let's say, sometimes we have 5 judges or sometimes 3. 5, we all want to start off with holes and halves. And what I mean by that is if the wave was an average ride, and that's where we all decide it's an average ride, we would start off with a 5. Okay, this is a 5. That's now what we would call our benchmark. Now we're going to compare that wave for the rest of the heat. Is it going to be less than the 5, or is it going to be higher than the 5? So let's say yellow stands up, and we watch and we go, woo, that wasn't as good as the 5, but that falls into the 4. I like that. So we're going to go to a 4. Now we're still in the holes. Numbers. Okay. Blue takes off. We're like, wow, that was a little better than yellow's 4. Wasn't as great as the 5. So let's go 4-5. And that's kind of how we establish our scores. And until once we utilize that, then it kind of falls in place. Oh, that was a 4. Wasn't as good. It was better than the 4. Wasn't as good as the 4-5. So it goes into a 4-3 and vice versa. But we use the holes and halves to start. And this makes sure that us as judges keep our scale very tight together, because, you know, you'd surprise yourself. Judge 1 throws a 5, and then the judge 5 over here has another 5 matching you. Well, maybe judge 3 has a 4-5, etc. And then we have a 4. And so you realize within this point range how close we are. And then that is the way we can decide the winners of heats. And just those little tiny nuances can break ties. And those are the type of things that we look at and so on. Just to keep on going, if you look to the right of the judge and scoring, you see interfered on. These are where we hope to never see interferences, but they do happen. And there's a way to fill this out. And if you look to the right where it says bad guy, you see the triangle. This is all just so until you do it. It's simple when you look at it after you've done it a couple times, but until then, you know, it's kind of to get it. So the bad guy, so if red's taken off, it's a left, and blue drops in front of them, well, obviously blue's the bad guy. So we would triangle his score. So let's go ahead and say it's his first wave, which is wave number 1. We would put the triangle over his score in that area, his or her score. And then the good guy would get circled. So let's say that was yellow's third wave that he was interfered on. So we would circle and draw the arrow from the triangle to the circle score. And that's how we show the tabulators where the interference began. And let me see. And then the rest is kind of no ties, 2-way, 3-way. This has a lot to do with our tabulating. And the boxes all the way to the right where you say total, place, and points, that is where we tabulate these scores. And now this is something that I know Joe, Michelle, and everybody's been pretty much involved in. So Joe, I figured this would be a good time for you to kind of jump in and
Sure, Dave.
Tabulating.
Yeah, and it's really helpful to our listeners how you explain that every heat is actually a fresh heat, and we're setting a benchmark for what is an average score each heat, because conditions change, competitors change, and so on. So in the column with the total, that will be the total of your 2 highest wave scores, which when compared surfer against surfer will determine your place in the heat. Also, you'll be assigned a point category, which you can see at the bottom, that you'll get for each place, and that gets added up and transferred to the tabulation sheet so that the tabulators can determine who had what place in the heat. Now, judges don't have to worry about the tabulation heat at this time, but as competitors, you should understand how to read a tabulation sheet and understand why you got the place you got. That being said, if a competitor places second in the heat, they might have 1 first, 3 seconds, and a third. So the first place gets thrown out, the third place gets thrown out, and the 3 seconds are kept, and that will give that surfer the second place. So
I think for next week, we need to figure out how to type in the numbers on this and actually show it.
I agree.
We can understand it a little bit easier.
Well, we could have some examples actually pre-done.
100%.
So from here, then after we total up the total and the place, and we then go over to the points, we go to the tabulation sheet. And Joe, do you want to keep going with this one?
So each judges will have their placing for each of the 4 or 6 colors, and they'll be assigned a point value for that placing. And when they throw out the high and low placings, the 3 out of 5 that are in the middle are kept, and that will determine the final place. And that would be the second column from the bottom. And then the name of the surfer would be right there. So as a competitor, you not only have to look at the top sheet or the tabulation sheet, you can go back and look at the individual judging sheets and see what each judge gave you for a score on that wave. And you can see how consistent the judges had been with regards to what place they gave you. Ideally, all judges have all 6 competitors in the same place. That's 100% judging. Sometimes there's a lot of good surfers and they're close, and you'll see first and second shared between 2 surfers or more. So you can go take a look at a heat and gain some understanding of what kind of heat that was by looking at the tabulation sheet and going back and looking at the individual judging sheets.
If I could say one thing too, real quick, Joe.
Oh, absolutely.
For the novice people watching this right now that really don't understand, this is their first introduction into judging. just always remember on the actual heat sheet, which is what you're looking at right here, the highest points wins the heat. You're looking for the highest two-wave total. On the tabulator sheet now, you're looking for the lowest total numbers because you're dealing with placings from the heat sheet. I just wanted to bring that up so that people understand that. We get a lot of that in our local level with new parents that aren't, aren't used to it. They look at the heat sheet and go, oh, well, he got more points on this tabulator sheet than any of the other kids, and he got sixth. So you got to explain, okay, well, this sheet you're dealing with placings, not points. So I just wanted to bring that up. Sorry.
No, that's a very good point, Jason. Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Yeah. And I think it's important also, going back to the judges' sheets, as a competitor after your heat, to go take a look at it, see what the judges are rewarding. Then you'll start to figure out what the criteria is. And wow, that wave felt good. That's probably why I got a 6.5. Or, oof, that wasn't a good wave. What did I get on that? Oh, that was a 2.5 or so, or 1.5. And those are the type of things you start to notice you're surfing. So when you're out there, at the higher levels, you'll have live scoring. At the regionals and their Easterns Championship, we'll give live scoring. But at your local district, you're going to have to look at these sheets to even have an idea while you're out in your heat. Wow, I think that was a 2.5. I probably need a 5.5 to get it. Man, I just saw that person just rip that wave. So I really need to step up the game. And I think by looking at those sheets after your heats, if you made it to the next round, etc., you'll get to know what the judges are rewarding. And never be afraid to approach a judge about what we're looking at in the water that day. As a local district, wouldn't it be perfect if every time we walked out and the waves were just amazing and going off? But typical contest, it's not. It's going to be smaller days. And that's what, we want to talk about, is some of this criteria. And again, this is what we're going to go over on the next course, is, the speed, power, flow. Because one day, if you can get enough speed on a knee-high day to get a maneuver, that is going to open up your scale. Even if you didn't get really a big turn, it's just the fact that you can generate speed on a small wave. So we weigh out these types of things in the criteria to come up with our scores. And those are the things that, by looking at these sheets and understanding that, you're really going to understand what the judges are looking for that day. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, and Joe, you brought something up, one thing as judges, you want to make sure that your wave counts are correct. It is so easy to get off a track when you have 6 surfers in a heat, and it's just the way it's designed. You can have this surfer stand up, this one stand up, and then as they're going down the line, 2 more surfers stand up behind it, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost like your eyes are going this way. But you have to be able to make sure you get your scores down. And again, this goes back to surfing IQ, to understand what you're seeing and be able to have confidence in your scoring. And it just doesn't happen overnight. It's taken me a long time. And I'll take us down a little rabbit hole here. Again, going back to, I used to go off of feelings until I worked with a pro panel. And then I got to see that there is this thing that we call recall. And again, I remembered waves and I understood them, but I didn't get it to the highest level until I worked with the highest level of judges. And what recall is, and this was the funniest thing, was Travis Williams actually and Jeff Klugel. I think Travis threw a 5.5 and Jeff was like, really? Hey, you like that one better than this wave earlier? And Travis was like, yes, I do. And that wave that he was talking about was like 4 hours ago. And he was like, really? Well, what jersey was he wearing? And Travis was like, red. Was he goofy foot or regular? Goofy foot. Was he on his backhand or front hand? Backhand. What did he do? And he was able to recall that wave 100%. And because he's able to do that, he has the ability and trust of every panel member around him, because he's just not throwing an empty score. It's just not a guessing game. This is a real comparison. And that's, as a competitor, you want that. You want somebody judging your heat and caring about what they're looking at, because this is important to us. Wouldn't we all want to win? But to have somebody be able to look at that and make that decision, and to be able to make the correct calls and look at that, I think is amazing. You know, and then this brings us into competitors. If you ever sat down on a panel, you get to see that, hey, we're not out there to give you guys a hard time. We actually, this is a camaraderie. There's a symbiotic relationship between the judges and the competitor. We want to see you do better, especially as a whole in this organization. We want to see you grow as a competitor. So if this is what you want to pursue, you'll have the ability and the tools to do so. So by reflecting on your scores and understanding this, it's going to help you at the highest level. And again, don't be afraid to talk to the judges. Sit down on the panel, and then you'll realize that, no, we're not out against you. This is actually what we're here. We're here to recall, to care about your waves. And I think this is an important thing. And Cassidy Mclean is on right now. She's been judging with us at the regionals and at the Eastern Championships. We also have worked with Rob Kelly, and some of the feedback that they have gave us, it really made me feel proud of what we're accomplishing, because when they got up there to see that, it kind of gave them the opportunity to realize, whoa, okay, now I see really how these scores are being held, what the criteria is, and how this varies. And it gave them a confidence in the water that they were able to take into their heat and start winning heats. And I remember that year because Rob Kelly really turned it on in the QS that year. And one thing he did say, and I brought it up with the interview with Jason, is that judging really kind of opened his eyes to that and what we're looking for. Like, oh, I could tell you right now, I feel that was a 4 or 5. I need a 6.5, and I need it now. So how to do that? Anyways, sorry.
Yeah, that was great, Dave. Thanks.
I think that's really important. And I think it's important for everybody on here, especially the competitors, to realize why it all ties together and why it's really important when you're not surfing in your heat to come up and volunteer and judge and sit with the judges and shadow them at first maybe and see why they're throwing a 1 here and a 3 here. And, you know, and I think it'll help. I know it helps them in the water when they're surfing in their own heats.
Yeah, 100%.
And that brings me back to what we normally see at our local districts, because a lot of times you're in really bad conditions. It might not even be knee high. And there's a lot of up and downs, up and downs, up and downs, or just going straight. And I think, you know, as a tabulator, the tabulators, God bless them, they see all these 1s and 1.5s and, and maybe a 2 here and there. But I think it's, you know, is there any way to make it a little bit easier on these judges? Is there a better way for them to distinguish the difference between the average waves that we see at most of our contests?
Well, I don't know if this answers your question directly, but a lot of times when we have 2-foot conditions and we have you know, younger beginner surfers in the water, or you know, good surfers, but the conditions are low, we tend to amplify the score a little bit and give a little bit more of a point spread. So even on a 2-foot day, you can have a 9-point ride. So we adjust the scale to the conditions. And you can do that when people are, you know, you can really break down the difference between standing up and falling down, standing up and making a turn, standing up and going a little bit down the line, or standing up and getting 1 turn off. And you can amplify it. Instead of it being in a range from 1 to 3, it can be in a range from, say, 1 to 7.5.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yep, 100%. And, you know, this might be something that not everybody does in their district, but we've opened up one called the Push and Go. And it's something really because a lot of the kids are riding straight, and how we're going to separate that. And so we do open up the scales for this. If a kid gets pushed in, he's right in the white water and just going straight. That might be just our 1-5 to a 2-5 or maybe a 3. But when we see an actual kid take off and drop into the pocket and just drop in and head down and ride the face, we're going to open the scale up to a 7. And it's, you know, such a big reach, but it is. We need to develop, we have to find a winner and take those nuances to create a scale. And that's what we kind of look at. That was a great point, Joe. Great point.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. We have a question in our chat. Can you touch upon different criteria for different age groups?
I think criteria will always stay the same. I think it goes off of the level of the heat itself. And that's the trickiest part. But the criteria will never change. It always will be. But if it's pumping and there's big barrels that day, okay, we're going to look for some barrels. But if there's open faces, we're going to look for just the combinations of maneuvers, something like trestles or so on. We're going to, you know, look at those criteria. But when it comes to age groups and, you know, different stuff like that, criteria stays the same. It's truly the skill level in there until you reach the pro where, you know, this is 25 heats at this level. We can establish a benchmark for those 25 heats, period. But when we go from juniors or girls 14 to 16 to men's to 14, boys 14 to 16, etc. Like that's where you just have to look at the heat itself. And we, like I said, we create benchmarks along the way. So if we have 2 heats that are similar in the same age group, we're going to hold that benchmark between those 2 heats. If not, we're switching this heat to this heat to this heat, Menehune to 14 to 16. We have to create a benchmark in each heat. And that goes back to the beginning. Was that a 4? Or even if it's a 2 that starts off, or somebody falls and that's a 1-5. Well, is the next wave better than that? How much better was it? Was it, and this also helps as a judge, was it 2 times better? Was it 3 times better? So these are things you start to get together with your mind to make that score faster. Well, if it was 2 times better, well, there's your score. It's a 3. So those are the things that we start to just go through your head as a judge. And again, until you sit on the panel and do it, it will not become second nature. I mean, you can be the surf genius, but it doesn't matter. It's a mathematics game. And you have to establish benchmarks and separate the nuances in that surfing. Bottom turns. How deep was the bottom turn? Did he hit it in the pocket? Did he create speed out of it? Longboarding sometimes, you know, I used to look at that as something that was like, oh, that was a nose ride. But if you really look at it, a nose ride can be different. A nose ride could drop to the bottom. If they're dropping to the bottom water on the nose, they're losing speed. But if they hover when they get to the nose and the board lifts, they're gaining speed. So these are the type of things you have to recognize. And to do that, it takes practice or time, judging at a higher level, or again, if you just have it, you have it. And I think, and this goes into a funny thing, not every ripper is a great judge. We've had some pro surfers sit down on the panel and can't judge. So it's a funny thing. So it's not a natural thing. And it is natural. Cassidy did a great job. Shout out to Cassidy. And Rob Kelly, the same. But it's not easy to do. And you have to be focused all day. I mean, sometimes we can go from 7:30 in the morning until 7:30 at night. And you might get a couple breaks, but that's it. You have to stay focused and you have to compare. Again, like I said earlier, that one Eastern, 5,500 something waves to compare throughout a week. I mean, your brain, you go, you know, and it's funny as judges, like you would go home and you're like, hey, let's hang out, but you're just done. You're burnt. But the funny thing is that we do, is we turn on the competition and watch another competition. So it's just because we're surf nerds. We love it so much. And that's really at the end of the day. And I think that's what brings us all together as surfers. It's that we have a passion for the ocean. We have a passion that just is so strong. And as a community, we always come together, and it's just the funniest thing. And especially becoming part of the ESA, I kind of felt like I was a wanderer when I was a kid and traveling. But now working as a judge, I found this large family, and especially I see with the ESA, Jason, especially here, getting to watch his interviews recently and hearing them talk and all the people that he knows, and he can name off names from everybody up and down the coast. And that just shows that's a family. And, you know, you could be stuck in this district, but at the end of the day, when you get that invite to the regionals or, you know, and even the championships, you start to meet families of like minds, and you realize what a family we are in a community. And it's even bigger when you go to a pro level, and then you meet people from California, Puerto Rico, Brazil. It's a family, and it's amazing. And there's nothing like it, and there's no other sport in the world like it. And I'm just so proud to be a part of it and a part of the ESA too, and what we're doing. I think we're a very progressive organization when it comes to amateur work, and that's thanks to Michelle and Joe here. You know, we brought in priority judging, which something that hasn't been done at an amateur level. But again, if that's what you want to pursue, it's there for you. We have an all-star team that goes to Hawaii, that takes you in the waves of consequences so that you can start to learn to push yourself at a higher level. You have Jason here to guide you through that. That to me is what this family is about. And I think you will find at any level you want, if you just want to come out and hang out with families on the beach and surf at the local district, we're there for that too. It doesn't have to be strictly pro, but that's the beautiful thing about the ESA. And I just wanted to say that. So thank you guys for letting me be a part of that.
Thank you. And I think that ties into what the ESA wants to encourage everybody on this call and others. You know, when we're at regionals, come up and shadow these judges at your local events. Go and, you know, ask if you can go up and sit behind these judges and watch what they're doing. And that's how you're going to learn and maybe be able to sit at the panel.
100%. Yep. And then you start to travel, and that's the great thing. So it's nice.
Yeah, we're always glad to hand a young competitor a judging sheet and let them score their waves alongside of them and make comments. And, you know, we've had our judges are great with respect to doing that and bringing new competitors into the fold, whether they're going to continually go on to do some judging on a higher level or just enhance their competition.
So somebody wrote at the regionals, right? I think, you know, you kind of, to get up there and judge at the regionals, you kind of have to work your way through the panels, and you do. I mean, it would be nice to be up there because it'd be cool that if everybody could shadow, but we're on a scaffolding. It's really hard to get everybody up there. We can't do that, but man, we would love to. But that's stuff that I think as the organization right now that we really want to work on. You know, first, with the local judges, let's get everybody to be able to sit down on the panel there and being recognized. Again, that was my journey. Like, I had to get on there. It took me probably 2-3 years judging at an amateur local district before I got the invite to do just a pro-am, maybe Sweetwater or these other little small comps, you know, pro comps. And then that's where I met the other pro judges. And by doing a good job there, I had to put in my time there for 2 or 3 years. And then one day I just got the call, hey, we need you at Belmar in New York. Can you just show up for one day, just one day, and do a sit-in? And I was like, whoa, WSL just called me to come sit in for one day. I'm in the car that night, driving all the way there just to be there for one day. And because of that effort, it opened up my door to the future for judging. And that's what it is. It's like a mentorship. You work your way through it. It's something that you don't see a lot of anymore, or any longer, I guess. And But that's what my journey was. And I think to become a judge, you kind of do have to do that. You have to put in your hours. You have to put in your time. And that's how you get to those regionals, to the championships, and then to the WSL or Pro-Am comps.
But it's safe to say that those on here who do not have the ability or desire to go that far can still just come up and sit down and help us out at our local district and make it a great event. Yeah,
we do need that. And again, being fair and just concentrating and sitting down in that seat, not just a social hour. That's my, because you want the same attention when you're in the water. You want people watching your waves to give you the proper score.
So we have a couple questions. One was from an anonymous attendee. What do you do about new judges who just don't get it? Go ahead, Jason.
So, you know, my fiance, Chrissy, is the director of ESA North Florida, and I'm down there helping her with the contest. And we have a great group of, you know, people that want to help us out. Some of them want to judge and they just don't get it, you know, and they really want to help and stuff like that. And the way we handle that is we give them other things to do. Maybe they're good at tabulating. Maybe they're good at being the flag person or the timer. Maybe they're good at being the heat sheet runner. Maybe they're good at updating the board. You know, you always want to be really nice to them because they're trying, but yeah, you're right. Some people just don't get it, you know, and like Dave said, you know, he's got professional surfers that he's had to deal with stuff like this. You know, you put it in, you know, in a very nice way. The judging just really isn't their thing, but we've got so much that we can get you to help out with. You know, thank you for wanting to help here. Can you do this for me? So that, you know, that's kind of, I try my best because usually when we go down for these contests, the judging part of it is my job. I gather the groups and, you know, coordinate who's got heats and who needs to be in, who needs to be out. And so I deal with that quite a bit. And, you know, there are a lot of people that really want to help out, but they just don't get it. And it causes a big headache for the tabulators. So, you know, I try to, you know, identify that and, you know, replace them, you know, after a few trial and errors, or get them out, but, you know, give them something else to do that's just, you know, that's just as important to making the whole system run.
100%. And I see a question here, and I think this is a great one too. Can you explain the importance of and the role of a head judge? A head judge, I think there's a lot that it gets misconstrued with what a head judge does, like, oh, we influence scores, etc. But that's not really the level of what we're there. We're kind of there to bring us together in our opinions. We think in averages. So if a three-person panel, I'll try to do it this way. Judge 1 has a 4, Judge 2 has a 4 or 5, Judge 3 has a 5. Well, that's a 4 or 5 average. And in our heads, like, so if I see a wave, this is how I do it. And every judge has their own system that they work with. But in my head, I'll be like, that was a 4 to a 5. And then I look at my panel, and my panel goes, oh, 4, 4, 5, and a 5. And I'm like, oh, we're right there. So 4, 5, okay, perfect. But if we have a judge that throws a 3, and then I have a judge that Judge 2 throws a 4, 5, and a 5, then if there's time to be able to do this, we'll talk about it. So, okay, what did you see on that 3? What did you not like about it? And that's the kind of stuff that we bounce off of each other. Well, I like this, but I didn't think he fumbled. Well, okay, 4, 5, and 5. Judge 2 and 3. What did you see? Well, I saw this. Okay, can we work together within this points? And that's the thing that we do. It's. I wish I could say it was like a machine and it was perfect, but it's not. And that is what a head judge's role is. And by the way, while they're writing scores, we try to keep our eyes on the water too, and that helps with our wave counts and seeing things. We're kind of just like a repeat button. You don't have replay, but you know, I try to give a recall of what I saw on the wave. Oh, well, that was a down carve. Finish it with a floater. Was that incomplete or complete? And those are the kind of things that I ask our panel, and that's really it. Well, did y'all think it was complete? And if everybody's like, no, then does the score really reflect that? And then they have to answer. So we're not really there to tell a score. but let's work it out in our head. And that's what we try to, and we want to be within a point or a 0.5. And the only time you see those 0.5 differences is when there's these different criteria. Somebody's weighing speed over this part of the criteria, and they like that. And that's the importance of the judges, because judges are very opinionated, and we have to work within the level of the scoring together. And so there's only times sometimes we'll let a 1.5, because I can see that. Oh, I can see that that's why you like that a little better or a little less. And those are the things we have to work with, and the averages. And that's about it. We're just there to kind of orchestrate. And that's about it.
That was a good answer.
That was a good answer.
So real quick, I don't have any questions right now. If anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them up in the chat or ask in the Q&A. But while we're waiting for just a couple minutes to see if anybody else has that, Kat from Delmarva sent us one of her sheets that she took a picture of. So anyway, maybe you can just go through this real quick while we're just waiting to see if we have any questions. This kind of just shows the numbers.
So it looks like red's first wave. So we were looking at it, red took off. All right, here you go. We'll just go like this. So let's say white caught the first wave of the heat, started off with a 4. Perfect. That's our benchmark. So now we're going to compare anything of that 4. So then let's say red took off. Second wave. Was it better than white's or was it worse? So we were like, I didn't like it as good as white. So how far do you go down? Well, I think it was a point less. That was a 3. So now we're establishing this benchmark. Yellow then takes off, which would be our third wave. And then you're like, oh, okay. Ooh, man, it was close to reds, but I didn't think it was as strong as reds. So 2.5. And then orange. Wow, that was pretty similar. 2.5. Now, see, this is where it gets tricky, because you really don't want to throw sometimes the same scores as a judge, but it happens. This is where separation might need to be done. So is yellow and orange the same wave? Sorry, who's the judge on this sheet? Donnie. So I'm sorry, Donnie. So we have to compare the 2.5 to the 2.5. And this is the difference of nuances. And again, this is the only way, as judging often and keep going, that you'll be able to recognize the difference, because no wave is ever the same. And then we have a couple 2.5s in here. So you really have to compare the waves. And so that's where it just gets difficult. So white, let's go back to white's first wave. And the first wave of the heat was a 4. So here's our benchmark right now. Whoa, white's second wave was amazing. We're looking at this in the good range. Wow, I think that was 2 times better than his first wave. Boom, there's your score, an 8. Then etc. Red probably had an up and down on the second wave, which probably stood up. Let's say they stood up and maybe attempted a bottom turn and fell. And their third wave is an 0.5. They probably took off and fell as they were pushing off their board, and that's your 0.5. And then we have another 2.5, and then so et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, and that's how you separate. Let's see, explain the reason for the initial on white's second wave. The reason why that initial was there, and I can tell you why, because my first thought when I saw the heat sheet was, is that an 8 or a 5? But it's an 8. And that was their initial showing that they agreed it was an 8, that it's their way of saying, yes, I stand by, that's an 8. Sorry for the scratch, basically. And again, when you're writing it like this, you're going to have situations where you're writing, so it might be a little difficult because somebody else, like you could say when white stood off, you're like, whoa, that was amazing. But as you're writing it down, red, yellow, and orange take off at the same time, both ones, 1 5s and a 1. So, I mean, those are the scenarios that can happen. So it kind of looks like chicken scratch a little bit. And that's the only reason for the initial right there.
Dave, at the same time, there's a question about what happens when you write down the wrong score. Do you cross it out or grab a new sheet?
Well, there is, if you have time, I mean, everybody likes a clean judges sheet. Sometimes when we do have, and really there's no wrong score, sometimes we might have a misplaced score, like we thought it was his third, but it was really a second wave. What we like to do is we'll go ahead and take the sheet and put one underneath of it, and then you start to fill it out correctly. But you keep this sheet, say if this was the bad sheet and you had a good clean one, you still keep this sheet. So if any mistakes happen again, like your score is not, you know, you can't read it, you have a nice clean sheet underneath. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that this reminds me of when I'm got my little crew down here in North Florida, and we have 3 judges and we have a head judge behind them. What I like about this is I tell them to talk about the scores. Talk about it. You guys are a team. Let's work together. Let's try to make everything work out. And when I see this, it looks to me like they wrote a 6. And I think what happened, and I could be totally wrong, but what I'm thinking is they got together and talked about it, and the guy changed it to an 8. Maybe the other 2 guys saw something that he didn't quite see, but instead of leaving a 6, which could have messed things up, he changed it and then initialed it. And I like that, you know. Yeah. I know it gets.
I agree. And that's another possibility. And the only way to know that is to look at the other judge's sheet to really tell. Mm-hmm. So if this was a 5-person panel or 3-person panel, I could look at that sheet, and like you just said, Jason. So if there was a judge, say this is judge 1 right here. Judge 2 might have had a 7-5 and a 7-5 for judge 3, but judge 1, like you said, might have wrote a 6. And this is where the comparisons come in, like you're talking about, we brought up earlier, is as a head judge. Well, what do we see? What do we like? Okay, I could see why this is in the good range. What do you think? And that's how we work together as a team. I saw another question pop up. Let me see here. What is the best way? What if you miss a wave? Well, that's where writing on these sheets, you have to have that second paper just, you know, to do it. Unless you're an artist, you can change the numbers, you know. When I say change numbers, turn a 5 into an 8, you know, or so on. But I mean, and again, it's like, let's just admit this is human. This is what we're doing, is we're judging live. This isn't live theater. This isn't like where we can watch a replay and go through this. So, and we're trusting you to write a score, and then we go over the score. So there's going to be issues like that that's going to happen, and especially with missing the wave when there's so many people that can stand up at once. And that's the next question. What is the best way to score when multiple surfers are up at the same time? You know, you really, and this is things we'll go over with Gordon Lawson also, and where he's just a genius when it comes to these type of things of separating criteria, is one of my mentors in judging. But it's the one thing is you pick out the moments. And so if red, yellow, green, red stands up real fast and falls over, well, stop watching that wave. You know, that's going to be your 1. So, you know, if you can, like I can sometimes just have my hand on red and write the 1. And then, but while I'm writing the 1, I'm watching the other surfer. Boom, boom. Okay, that was kind of mediocre turns, 2, 5, 3. But then I catch out of my other eye, just full on vertical spray, pow, the moments. And that's where it comes together. And it's, again, it's not anything you can teach anybody. It's you have it or you don't. And that's the crazy thing about becoming a judge and practicing this. It's in anything in your life, you have to put time and effort into to become good at it. And, you know, there was a book that was written, if you put 10,000 hours into something, that's the best you're going to be at it. So, and you have to decide if it's like, you're good at it or not, you know, and that's it. And that's the one thing about judging. There is no way to do it. Kurt Page, a California head judge I worked with, wanted to write a book about what goes through a judge's mind when he throws a score. And it's so funny because so many judges have a different approach and technique to it. But again, I think the best way to, when you see multiple surfers up at once, is you recognize the moments and what they're doing. And by being able to do that, you will be able to separate your scores and so on. Dave, have you guys ever had a situation where, like, say we're in Hatteras, waves are firing the talent, you're like, say you're in the quarters, semifinals, whatever, you get a wave coming in, guy goes right and left. The very next wave, guy goes right and left. You guys ever have a situation where you might say, like, hey, Brandon, watch red, Cassie, watch blue, you know, I'm watching white, you know, Chip, watch yellow. Do you guys ever do something like that and then collaborate together on what you saw? The only time that we will ever do that is if you have one person sitting 100 yards over here and another person sitting 100 yards over here. And it's basically more falls on the spot. Hey, Brando, keep your eye on yellow all the way to the north, since we're on the East Coast.
Yeah, you really have to utilize your peripheral vision.
Yeah, and then because as judges, we have to watch, and sometimes we do. Sometimes we'll miss one thing on the inside because we're watching all this go down. And I think the trickiest thing is when two people literally at the same time, boop, and it's like, and they're far off. Yeah. And so one judge will catch a little bit of that wave over here more, and this judge catches a little bit of that. And again, this is our open conversation that we have is, well, what did you see out of that? Well, he really nailed it in the pocket, or she nailed it in the pocket, and et cetera. And then we start comparing, well, did you think it was a 5-5, you know, or in the 6-5? Was it an excellent wave? Well, I thought it was here. Did you compare? Did you like it compared to that 6-5 that was thrown 5 heats ago? No, I didn't. Okay.
One of the other questions we had was, someone asked, how do we determine what place someone gets when there's a tie? And I just want to go back to the tabulating sheet. Basically, if two surfers are tied on the top 2 waves, we count only the top 1 wave. If those 2 top first waves are equal, then we go to the 3rd wave, and so on. So there is a method for doing that. And it happens quite frequently.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I think 2 of the questions that we have in the feed right now are both about spotting. And one of our local members, Kat, out of Delmarva, she said that she hears the judges calling out, you know, white up, red up, to know, and for all eyes looking up. And then we have a question about, do we use spotters to call out jersey colors, especially at times of extreme sun glare? And I do know at Easterns, especially in the morning when that sun's coming up in September, it's difficult. And we do have spotters that go out on the pier and, you know, also sit behind the judges and call it out.
Yeah. And then the local district, the head judge usually falls into that unless we have a volunteer that wants to spot that day. And again, that's what's so important about having volunteers to come and work with us. And typically a spotter is not a bad place to be if you want to be a judge, because you get to hear the lingo and become part of it and build a confidence with your judges, because you are calling scores and so on. I mean, not scores, I apologize, colors. And so it gets you vocal, red up, yellow, you know, yellow paddling, taking a look. These are the key things. You don't want to create a big open sentence when you're spotting, but you just want to call the color and get it done. But yeah, the glares on the East Coast can be pretty tough in the morning, especially in glassy conditions. And, you know, as a surfer, just remember that, like, if we can't see you, it's extremely hard to judge your scores. And I know you can't help it. Sometimes the peak is right there, but you know, those are the type of things to become a smart competitor, is when you look out in the morning and if you're glare, you know, and you're standing behind the judges panel on the beach and you're looking, you're like, whoa, they're not going to be able to see me. Maybe I want to paddle out there. And, you know, making the right wave decisions too. Like, you don't need to catch 10 waves to win a heat. The best way is to look at your scoring. And again, by going back to your judging sheet and looking at your scores, you start to realize in your head, this wave lining up is like knee high, but there's some chest high sets coming in. Am I going to be able to turn this into a 5-5 that I know that I need? Maybe not. So why go for it? It'd be best to sit on the outside and wait for a better set to come and take your chances that way. And then sometimes you might just need a 1. And sometimes you just need to go drop in and stand up. You know, there's this, and that's the funny thing about it. But if you're serious about competing at a local district, looking at the sheets will get you tuned up to knowing your scores out in your mind, out in the heat, because you're not getting live scores. So in a live score like regionals or championship, the Easterns, you do get those scores. So you're like, man, I need a 5-5 and I got a 3-5. So I need something better than that. But at home in your local district, you have to create this thing in your mind, like, oh, okay, my last heat out, they called that a 3-5. All right, this was this. I need this. And so you start to realize what your scores are and how to get them.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, good information. And the last thing I think we want to close out tonight, but Chad Gallagher, our district director from Southern New Jersey, made the best statement on here. And he said, it's important to note that in 15 or 20 minutes, anyone can beat anyone. That is what makes it fun.
True
So
that.
I think that's a great way to end this.
Yeah.
So again, thank you everybody for joining us. We are going to go further in depth into this next Monday at 7 p.m. where we'll have the same panel on and include Gordon Lawson, our head WSL judge. So we're going to go more into the criteria, correct, Dave?
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. And surfing IQ, as he calls it. Yep.
Speed, power, flow.
That's right.
Speed, power,
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. And don't forget to join tomorrow night online with Jason and Brett Barley. He's welcoming Brett Barley. They're going to be talking story tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Facebook Live. So hopefully we'll see all of you guys there. You can join us, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
Yeah.